Then we'll organise other parties to leave.
I'm going out with the wounded. I'm going out with the men.
What's the plan? What's the plan?
Well, our best bet is to go to the forecourts. If we get as far as Bow Street, then we'll be fine.
Right, we start evacuations in an hour. We're staying for one more hour. One final stand. I desire now, lest I may not have the opportunity later, to pay homage to the gallantry of the soldiers of Irish freedom who have, during the past 4 days, been writing with fire and steel the most glorious chapter in the later history of Ireland.
In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valour and discipline, and by the readiness of its children, to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Well, gentlemen.
On the morning of Easter Sunday, the 23rd of April, 1916, 7 men met in a room in Liberty Hall, in the heart of Dublin City.
Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government. Thomas Clarke.
By signing the proclamation of the Irish Republic, each man knew he was committing himself to bloody rebellion, and in all likelihood, signing his death warrant. They were an unlikely group of revolutionaries. A tobacconist, a cripple, a headmaster, a university lecturer, a piper, a socialist, and a poet. This is the story of 7 men who were willing to give their lives for what they believed was right. 7 men united by a common goal, whose actions would change the course of their country's history, and whose deaths would set Ireland on the road to freedom. In the years leading up to the Rising, there stood a small tobacco shop located just off the top of O'Connell Street, at number 75 Parnell Street. Above the premises was the name of the owner, T.S. O'Clearigh, Thomas J. Clarke, the first and oldest signatory of the 1916 proclamation. In many ways, Tom Clarke was the architect of the Easter Rising, and it was in his shop on Parnell Street that the foundations for rebellion were laid.
Relatively few people today in Ireland know much about Tom Clarke, but without his involvement, the Easter Rising would never have happened. To talk about 1916 without focusing on Clarke is like the American Civil War without Lincoln, the Bolshevik Revolution without Lenin. One contemporary described him as the embodiment of Fenianism, and another called him the mind of the revolution. That, I think, gives you some idea of the importance of this man.
The story of Tom Clarke begins not in Ireland, but on an island off the south coast of England, where James Clarke from Leitrim and his newly married bride, Mary Palmer from Tipperary, gave birth to their first child in March 1858. They christened him Thomas James Clarke.
Well, rugabé inis ocht amach ó chósta hasanna bhí ahar ina haidir agus bhí sé Londaíon sin. Nuair a bhí sé bliain roiis deistre an talach go dtí an Africas mar Londaíob an tathair an sin. Níor tháinig sé rais go héireann go dtí go raibh sé 6 mbliana roiis agus an sin dáis sé suas i gcontaí heróin i gceantar chun Gannon.
Dungannon, in the heart of East Tyrone, was a part of the country that had witnessed constant resistance to English interference in Irish affairs from the early modern period. It was a hotbed of paramilitary organisation, some of which was agrarian located, other which was politically motivated. The famine had afflicted that part of Ireland well into the early 1850s. And bearing in mind that Clarke was born in 1858, it was very much in living memory. So certainly this was a stronghold of the United Irishmen in times past, and it became a centre of Fenianism. The Dungannon-Coal Island nexus was very, very much a stronghold of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, which in 1867 had risen in arms in various parts of Ireland. So Clarke became drawn into that type of activity. And little wonder that when he was old enough to join, he became a member of the IRB in Dungannon.
The only thing that violence will answer to is violence. You suffer, your family suffer, your children suffer. How long do you want this to go on?
In 1878, the national organiser of the IRB, was a man called John Daly, visited Dungannon, and Clarke attended the meeting. He's spellbound by Daly, and very soon after that he decides to be initiated into the IRB, and it's Daly who does that. Therefore, from the late 1870s onward, Clarke is committed totally. He's got his mission in life, and his story thereafter is the evolution of that mission.
Sir, Mr. Daly.
Hello.
Thomas Clarke.
A pleasure to meet you.
Sorry, I missed a bit of that.
The IRB was a secret oath-bound society committed to ridding Ireland of English rule and establishing an Irish Republic through physical force. And it wasn't long before Clarke himself was playing a central role in local IRB activities.
Harla Slúchas in Dungannon idir an pobl agus Napólíní agus bhí rifle ag Clarke agus scuilte orchar leis Napólíní. Rud a chuir scantra árbis cosúil mar thug an slua faoin Napólíní sin agus bhain siad gunnaíróib. Agus bhí an imrí ar na húdarás faoin rudse agus mar sin thocra Clarke go raibh sé chomáige an cantar ágáil ar bhaile leis féin. Bhí cards eile leis go leir America go America mar sin thocra sé féin an ru céanna dhéanna.
Clarke arrived in New York in the year 1880, when he was 22 years old. He managed to find work almost immediately as a hotel porter, but more importantly, he also made contact with the American arm of the Fenian movement, Clann na Gael.
Bhí Clann na Gael an tábhachtach an taobh Americanach de glóiseach na poblacht. Bhealach bhí siad go tábhachtach leis an dramanéireann, bhí níos mó saoirseach America, agus bhí siad an smaointe poblachtach a scapa, agus airgad a bhaileach an chúis rud a bhí tábhachtach, agus go leorach na rudaí a tharla sa tréimhse seo, buad Clann na Gael a bhí taobh héarthóib in áíre, agus thocra siad san go mo cheart, feachtas búmála a thions na bhsasna.
Following a series of failed uprisings in Ireland, the IRB and Clann na Gael had decided to strike at the very heart of the British Empire and embarked on a campaign designed to put the issue of Ireland at the forefront of British politics.
Clarke is sent back to England to participate in a dynamite campaign in England. At that time, bombs were being set off across London, places like the Tower of London and the Underground. The problem was, of course, that the police knew everything. The operation was riddled with informers, and they were actually following Clarke as he was engaged in surveillance missions.
The experience of being betrayed by an infiltrator in England when Clarke was on active service for the Fenians in Britain certainly, in my opinion, added greatly to his sense of personal security. It may have contributed to his desire to be always in the background, a shadowy figure, a manipulative figure, but involved at one point removed. It's not, I think, inconsiderable that in his later revolutionary career he was never directly betrayed by any close associate.
Clarke was tried in the Old Bailey in London in June 1883 under the assumed name of Henry Hammond Wilson, a pseudonym he had adopted during the course of the dynamiting campaign. He was found guilty under the Treason Felony Act and sentenced to penal servitude for life.
You are all now inmates of Millbank Prison, and as such are subject to Her Majesty's regulation for the treatment of penal servitude prisoners. Strict silence must at all times be observed. Under no circumstances must one prisoner speak to another. There is no hope of release for life prisoners until they have completed 20 years. Each case will then be decided on its own merits. Take them away.
Clarke was one of the special men. He did 15 and a half years in really what was the British equivalent of Devil's Island. It was a calvary of suffering in which he endured physical hardship, mental desolation, emotional deprivation, in a regime that was clearly designed to crush the prisoners physically and spiritually.
The authorities aimed at making life unbearable for us, harassing morning, noon and night, and on through the night. Harassing always and at all times. Harassing with bread and water punishments, with no sleep tortures and other tortures. This system was applied to the Irish prisoners, and to them only, and was specifically devised to destroy us mentally or physically, to kill or drive insane.
Clarke saw people around him go insane, and year after year he had to battle against slipping into depression, because he knew that if that happened, that way madness lay. He had to get through this.
The golden rules of life for a long sentence prisoner. Clench your teeth hard and never say die. Keep your thoughts off yourself all you can. Guard your self-respect. If you lost that, you'd lose the backbone of your manhood. Keep your eyes wide open and don't bang your head against the wall.
I meas na brísúnach nua hánig isteach sa brísún le linn go Clarke bheith an. Chonaic sé John Daly lá bháin, seo é an fear a thug isteach imránachas na poblach é an chéad lá. D'fheireadh lob teagháil a dhéanamh le chéile, bhí córas acu le buillí a bhúla ar bhaile an phrísún. Cinál cód le go bhéidir is a bheith láras le chéile. Bhí nós acu teachtrachtaí ágáil I bhálach is a brísún na náteach a dhéagsúla. Agus mar sin chuine siad a teagháil agus chuine siad misneach a chéile beo.
He was able to rely on the friendship and the protection of a few people like Daly. But Daly is eventually amnestied after almost starving himself to death in a hunger strike. And then essentially Clarke is left on his own. Only a person of remarkable willpower and resilience could have got through the hell that he endured.
Here we are in 1893, and I have been in prison 10 years, almost a third of my lifetime. No one can understand the hardship and misery it means but myself. But notwithstanding it all, I am, from the heart's core to the fingertips, Irish still. Proudly Irish as in the old days.
Finally, after spending over 15 years behind bars, word came through that Clarke was to be released as part of a general amnesty on Fenian prisoners.
There's no doubt whatever that Clarke left prison a damaged individual in one sense. He's physically aged. He looks much older than he is. And also, I think it's fair to say, he's filled with an absolute hatred. A hatred directed against the people and the system which he blamed for robbing him of the best years of his life. And one day, he would have his revenge on those people and that system.
After spending 15 years in jail, Tom Clarke was released from Portland Prison in the winter of 1898. The following spring he made the trip down to Limerick to visit his old friend John Daly. He ended up staying with the Dalys on into the summer and forming a close bond with Daly's niece, Kathleen.
The family were shocked that someone so much older, and you have to imagine that he's 41 years of age, Kathleen is in her 20s, that the age gap is there. I mean, the last thing they expected that it was going to be that there was going to be a romance between one of the Dalys and with Tom Clarke. And it's interesting because when you read Kathleen Clarke's own account of her life, she's very determined to keep that contact with him.
Have you thought much about what you might do?
I was talking to John Devoy in America, and he was saying if I was interested, there's work there for me, but there might be better prospects for me over there.
Bhí Kathleen ní sóg ach bhí siise tócaí chun na principal chéanna garíre feadh síl siise bhí baint seiceise le cursaí poblachtacha chomá. Ach ní raibh siad an pósa go dtí goach postaige agus hepe réon fostáil in éireann mar sin dill sé ar na Stáit Aontaithe ríist. Pósa an sin iad America.
Clarke migrated to the US in 1899 and immediately became reintegrated into the Clan na Gael structures, and he becomes the right-hand man of the great John Devoy, possibly the greatest surviving Fenian in North America. And that really placed Clarke into the leadership hierarchy in North America. When one considers that Clarke applied for and received US citizenship in 1905, and in 1906 obtained 2 fairly substantial farm properties in New York State, it doesn't suggest that he'd immediately intended returning to Ireland, which he did in 1907. And that would lead me to suggest that there's more to that relocation than meets the eye. There's very little documentary evidence for this. This is purely informed speculation, but it's probably not a coincidence that 1907 was the year in which the IRB were essentially refounded in Ireland, predominantly under the offices of Bulmer Hobson, of Dennis McCullough, of Pat McCartan, and rising figures like Sean McDermott. Given the nature of the secretive life of the clan and the IRB, we're never going to know whether or not Devoy sent Clarke back to Ireland to head up the American interest in the IRB revival. But we do know one thing, that's exactly what happened.
In 1907, Tom Clarke arrived back in Ireland and moved with his family to Dublin City, where he immediately set about establishing a front for his revolutionary activities.
There is a splendid set of young fellows, earnest, able and energetic, around Dublin, with whom it is a pleasure to work. Fellows who believe in doing things, not in gabbing about them only. I am in great heart with this young thinking generation. They are men. They will give a good account of themselves.
Once Clarke had set up the front for the IRB in Parnell Street in 1907, he was in almost daily contact with nearly all the leading players, most notably Bulmer Hobson, who he would have encountered on his lecture tours in the United States. Amongst those who come into his milieu are the rising figure Sean McDermott. And McDiarmid essentially becomes the closest thing to an adjutant that Clarke would ever have. And indeed, these are the people who collectively produced 1916.
Sean McDiarmid was one of the first of many converts to Clarke's cause, and he travelled the length and breadth of the country spreading the revolutionary gospel. He continued his work even after suffering a bout of polio that left him crippled. Many of the converts that McDiarmid brought into the fold were drawn from the ranks of nationalist cultural organisations like Conor na Gaeilge and the Gaelic Athletic Association. These were organisations that had emerged as part of the cultural revival that Ireland experienced at the turn of the century, and they proved to be an ideal recruiting ground for the IRB.
Is dócha go raibh daoine ag iarraidh baile eile chuna bhéanúlacht ar chur an úl seachas polítíocht, mar bhí polítíocht tar éis clise ortha ar bhealach déantá rá. Ach hiagad ar aon nós nach raibh brí dá laid le saoirse politúil, gan saoirse cultúrtha a bheith acu ribhe sin agus in éindí. Agus ineall ar sin is dócha chuireadh ar spéis sean scéalaíocht na Gael sa tanga Gaeilge féin agus mar sin de. Mar a dúirt Douglas de Hide, not so much the fight as the thing fought for. Is dócha gur duine bhfuil lán daoine a arcú mar hampla as Conradh na Gaeilge, má scrúdaíonn tú brainse an chéitinig an seoim lá clia. Is léir gur tháinig roinnt an award an IRB as an roinse sin, agus gur hiagna daoine sin péiscéile gur áidlú bhaint idir cuasaí cultúrtha agus radicus sa pholaíocht.
Sampla má go an chuirthaige bhí ag Clarke se an chuí ar thug sé pádraic mac Pearse isteach. Bhí an pearsach ag obair le fada ag Conradh na Gaeilge, agus ní raon cháil ró mhór ar mar phoblachtúir, go dteann hial go leor poblachtóirí go raibh sé bhádró bheasara. Ach chunig Clarke go raibh cumasán, cumas cainte, cumas scríneoireacht agus mar sin agus go bhféadach sé bheith fónsach go maith an chúis, agus mar sin rinne sé iireacht ar le é thuairt isteach, agus a chuir chun leasa chun chúis agus go bhrárachas na poblachta.
We'd like to talk to you about the Emmett commemoration that's coming up. Both myself and Tom agree that it's a very important opportunity.
Very special day.
We have one issue though. We need somebody to make a speech that day.
Clarke, like many in the IRB, was initially wary of Pearse, who, up until 1912, was appearing on Home Rule platforms alongside John Redmond, the leader of the Irish Parliamentary Party in Westminster. For men like Clarke, Redmond was a traitor, and Home Rule was an insult to Irish freedom.
They thought that Home Rule, in a sense, was an absolute terminal danger to the Irish people. They weren't after a certain amount of devolution from England. They thought that a certain amount of devolution from England might, in fact, mean that if Redmond became leader of Ireland, Ireland would settle permanently into a devolved relationship as part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The great driving fear of Clarke and McDiarmid is that if this process went on indefinitely, in fact, if it went on for just a few more years, Ireland might become completely Anglicised. And they did regard that as effectively the extermination of the Irish people. In effect, I think they see a rising as a race against time. If they don't strike within the next few years, the situation will become hopeless. And that, I think, gives a tremendous urgency to their planning for a rising.
Events were gathering steam. The Dublin lockout of 1913 resulted in the formation of the Irish Citizen Army, a workers' defence force led by the socialist James Connolly. And in the north of the country, the prospect of Home Rule led to the formation of the Ulster Volunteer Force, a well-armed citizen militia expressly committed to resisting Home Rule by any means necessary.
Well, eindigdóirí a bhí mí hásta, gomach neamhsplachas ag éireann, thosa siad ag agrú fórsa gá gcuid héin óglaí ulla. Bhí Clarke beag nach sásta a méid seo eicáil, mar hiúil sé gomach sé mar hampla ag náisiúntóirí éireann, go bhfuidir sé an rud chéanna dhéanana fórsa a chur bon, agus déad fhí leas amhaint as a bhórsa seo le siir sin na tír amhaint amach.
There is talk of the volunteers, that they are marching, that they are organising. Let them organise. The more they organise, the better. They are giving us a great lead, and it won't be long before we follow them.
In direct response to the Ulster Volunteers, Clarke and the IRB began to prepare the way for the creation of a nationalist volunteer force, an open military organisation that the IRB could use as a revolutionary sword.
The day is coming when all young men of Ireland will be marching, drilling and learning the use of arms. Yes! That's what we want. All over Europe, it is the rifle that speaks now. And it won't be long before the rifle speaks to Ireland.
When the Irish Volunteers were formed in November 1913, 12 out of 30 members of its provisional committee were IRB men. But in an effort to make the organisation more amenable to moderate nationalists, Owen McNeill, a respected professor of history from UCD, was appointed as Chief of Staff. Clarke signed up as an ordinary level volunteer and took no leadership role in the organisation.
The Irish Volunteers, when they're formed, are a broad nationalist movement. So what Clarke and McDermott are doing, they're staying in the background. That was their style. They got other people to do the work under their guidance and direction. So you get people like Pearce, who's appointed Director of Organisation in the Irish Volunteers, Kent, Director of Communications. What they're doing is planting followers in strategic positions.
In July 1914, the Irish Volunteers successfully landed shipments of arms at Howth and Kilcoole. The storm clouds of war were darkening over Dublin and over the continent. 2 days after the Howth landings, Austria declared war on Serbia, and the nations of Europe were swept up in the tide of the Great War.
Nuair thosaigh an cogamór mílúnas an 1940, Fred Clarke mar a freidsich féin ní gcónaí gur a éigeandáil hasna mar yes ag éireann. Nuair a bhí arm na Breataine grathach in áiteach eile, bheadh seans ag muinte na héireann an deise hapú agus éir seohaint amach. Mar sin bunaíomh coiste míleta, tá sí an bhráthachas leis an gceiste Isró. Ag go buinte seo bhí trúr Eamon Kent, Pádraig Mac Pearse agus Joseph Plunkett. Nuair tháinig Clarke agus McDermott tá chosolacht ar a scéal go raibh rudaí níos daríre.
As the outbreak of what became the 1916 Rising neared, two other significant figures were co-opted. One was Tomás MacDonagh, very much a figure in the mould of Pádraig Pearse, and perhaps more significantly, James Connolly. The specific reason for bringing James Connolly into the conspiracy was purely pragmatic. Connolly, through his Irish Citizen Army, was in danger of preempting the Rising by having an armed protest unilaterally. That could have brought the forces of reaction down in such a way as to destroy the potential of the IRB for some time to come.
James Connolly was brought onto the Military Council in early January 1916, and a date for the Rising was set, Easter Sunday, the 23rd of April. Only an inner circle of loyal IRB men were made aware that a date for the Rising had been agreed. Even the head of the Volunteers, Owen McNeill, was kept in the dark until the last minute.
We bhí planned an éirí amach bra Owen McNeill an fear bhí ganas go hefigiúil na hóglaí. Ní ra sé an pártach in ulbó an éirí amach ach bhí sóla go ghlacha sé leis nuair a chonaigh sé go raibh sé go tarló agus an teachtain rih an éirí amach. Bhí sé dechar rá an mach sé lód na dachmach bhí cinál seasamh éagsúla ag ámantí éagsúla.
At the end of the week, when things start to fall apart, with Casement's arrest, the arms shipment goes down, McNeill does what he'd been doing for some years, flip-flopping. He comes out against the rising, issues his countermand order, and does something that the military council just couldn't believe. They had taken every precaution against every possibility, except that McNeill would act ruthlessly and decisively and essentially checkmate them, which of course is why they met at Liberty Hall on the Sunday morning at this absolutely vital meeting of the military council.
I should have back. I made myself an actor. Doesn't mention our one.
What has he done? What has that son of a bitch McNeill done?
See for yourself.
Owing to the very critical situation, all orders given to the Irish volunteers for tomorrow, Easter Sunday, are hereby rescinded, and no parades, marches or other movements of Irish volunteers will take place. Each individual volunteer will obey this order strictly in every particular.
The same countermand has been issued to every volunteer circle in the country. We'll be lucky if 100 men turn up.
So that's it. We can't go ahead now, can we?
Tomas, it's now or never. Casement is in custody. Sooner or later, they're going to round up the rest of us. All this means is that we have to delay the rising for 24 hours and issue fresh orders to clear up the confusion.
Confusion? And you want to issue more orders on top of these ones? No wonder the English think we're amateurs and fools.
And what about the rest of the country? Are we supposed to leave them to face the might of the British Empire with only pikes and flaming sods of turf?
Volunteers will fight with sticks and stones that they have to.
Tomas, even without the German arms, we must act now. The men are ready, and if we can hold out long enough for word to reach Germany, they may send a force to
The Germans were never going to win this for us. When we go into fight, we fight alone.
What if we take the fight to the mountains and join up with the men of the West?
Pierce, you're going to fight in Dublin.
What exactly are you trying to say?
There'll be no more hiding in the mountains. We're fighting on the streets.
What are you saying? There's no
We're
hiding
going to
in the
fight on the
mountains.
streets.
Hiding
We're going to
in
be
the
fighting in the
be
streets
hiding in
of Dublin.
It's joining up with the men. Join the forces.
Enough, gentlemen. Enough. We should stick to our original plan. McNeill's orders won't have got down the country yet. If Dublin rises, the country will follow.
Tom, we're all aware of what's at stake, and we're all as committed to the cause as we ever were, but the fact is this: we must postpone the action for 24 hours to clear up this McNeill mess!
The hell with McNeill! I say that we strike immediately. If we don't, we will be arrested and disarmed. I've been in an English cell, and I do not intend to go back.
Gentlemen, as members of the Provisional Government, we are no longer obliged to abide by consensus. So we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour of staying with the original plan, raise your arm.
Come on, lads. Sean?
All those in favour of postponing operations for 24 hours, raise your arm. We strike at noon tomorrow.
Very well. I'll draft up new orders and get them distributed to the men of the Western Branch. Tomas, call off the Dublin battalions. We have to get word out that we're on hold for 24 hours. Tell the men to stand down, but to be ready.
McNeill's countermand, although not fatal, was a severe blow to the military council's plans and destroyed whatever prospect there had been of a nationwide rebellion. For better or worse, the rising would now be a largely Dublin-based affair, and it was decided to carry out the Dublin-based operations as planned.
Tell them we've called the whole thing off. Tom.
Various key buildings at strategic points around the city would be occupied. Eamon Cant was given the task of taking the South Dublin Union, and Thomas McDonagh was to occupy Jacob's Biscuit Factory. The Four Courts, Boland's Mills and St Stephen's Green would also be seized. Clarke, McDermott, Pearse, Connolly and Plunkett would form part of the garrison based in the rebel headquarters in the GPO. On the morning of Monday, the 24th of April 1916, Dublin was bathed in glorious sunshine. It was a public holiday, and the city was in festive spirit, with many of its inhabitants, including most of the British Armed Forces, making their way out to Fairyhouse for the races. But in certain bedrooms and kitchens across the city, other men and women were engaged in more serious matters. They picked up their rifles, said goodbye to their loved ones for what they thought would be the last time, and went out to fight for their country's freedom. At 11:30, 150 men assembled outside Liberty Hall in Beresford Place alongside the Liffey. Amongst them was a young Michael Collins just back from London, and the future President of Ireland, Sean T. O'Kelly.
Fall in! Double columns! Quick march!
At 12:02, Pearse, Connolly and Plunkett led the column up Abbey Street, across O'Connell Street, and into history.
Check the top floor, see what's up there.
This building has been commandeered in the name of the Irish Republic.
We're seizing this building in the name of the Irish Republic. Everybody out!
Smash those windows! Barricade them! Get out! Quick, come on! Come on!
Come over here. Get
Roll up to the roofs, run those up the flagpole.
Irishmen and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valor, discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Don't fight in France, will you? Signed on behalf of the Irish Provisional Government.
Thanks be to God, Pearse. We've lived to see this day.
Pearse, I can die a happy man. I've lived to see the greatest day in Irish history.
On the wall.
These are the 7 signatories, and I think it's a mark of the standing of Clarke and the regard in which he is held. That his is the first name to the proclamation. And that's the key, I think. The fact that his name is pride of place shows you the regard, the admiration and respect that the other members of the military council had for Clarke.
That's coming down the street. How are we going to protect the building?
We'll be fine, we'll be fine. We'll be able to hold out a strong assault, believe me.
Má iallara ís is dói níra Clarke Harvey Gníomhach sa trodíocht hain ach lach sé pársan scuil sé le saidirí sasnacha a rinne seachtainna. Agus is dói gur chuide sé le go leor na trodí eile go raibh sé an gur cinál sampla bhí an rób nuair a bhí a misneacha a tep go bhacha sí Tom Clarke agus tá sé ráta go leor daoine gur thug sé spridscóp nuair a cholang siad an seanar seo a bhí ag obair ar honna poblachta le blianta go raibh sé iste gréileán na trod a leob chuid sé leob go mór.
People around the world know what's happening. Ireland will never be the same after this. You, me, every single man in this building, they have made a difference. They've changed Irish history.
By the end of the week, Pearse, I think, is out on his feet. He got very little sleep. The strain on him was immense. And of course, by the end of the week, Connolly also was injured, and he's out of it as well. It's then that Clarke and McDermott really come into their own. They're not just standing there chatting to people and encouraging them, they're actually taking decisions. They're sending people to various locations, they're evacuating various garrisons.
As the week wore on, the hopes of the leaders that the country would rise in support of the Dublin rebels evaporated. The British authorities, although initially taken by surprise, quickly regained the initiative, and fresh troops poured into the city to crush the rebel strongholds. On the Wednesday, heavy artillery shells began to rain down on O'Connell Street, and the centre of Dublin became an inferno. Inside the GPO, the situation became increasingly desperate as fire gripped the rebel headquarters. And on Friday, the decision was taken to evacuate the building.
Our best bet is to go to the forecourts. If we get as far as Burr Street, then we'll be fine. Right, we start evacuations in an hour. Yes. Men! We're staying for 1 more hour. One final chance.
The leaders managed to make it as far as a small shop on Moore Street, where the following morning, the military council met for the last time.
Hocra Canary and Irie Mach, Goreshana Macabite Gala, Eran Sahran, a reached vi Clarke Lashane, Evoltal and Iron Rudshaw, Hilshay, Gomacharhob, Iruch to Wanella, Yana, Agus Bader Nachrashi Gira Gala, Horbe, Gabarlish, Boss all. San Irie Mach na Gala, ach lach sé leis an gine bhí déanta. Nuair chuireabh tríolai, ní aran sé iirecht a bethe héana chosint. Brenn sé ar a gcuirt aram seo mar cheap mega. Ní aran sé óráid, ní ar chosan sé héin, lig sé gópa go le ra agus bhí é go hós, cin, bhre a bheith ag go gcuirt sin go gcuirfaí chun bá sé.
I was taken under arm guard to Kilmainham, and he stood in the cell with me. I got about an hour. Well, even then we didn't talk about anything about ourselves. We talked about the future and the future of the country. And he said, all of us that are going out tonight, he said, believe that we have saved the soul of Ireland. That we have struck the first successful blow to freedom, and that freedom is coming. But between this and freedom, he said, Ireland will go through hell. But he said, Ireland will never lie down again.
I'm sorry, Kathleen. You've never disappointed me, Tom.
Nor you me, my love. Nor you me.
I and my fellow signatories believe we have struck the first successful blow for freedom. The next blow, which we have no doubt Ireland will strike, will win through. In this belief, we die happy. Thomas J. Clarke, Kilmainham Jail, 3rd of May 1916.